The Arizona sun beat down mercilessly on Rose Zimmerman's shoulders as she knelt in the dusty earth behind her small adobe house, tears mixing with sweat on her weathered cheeks while she clawed at the stubborn ground that refused to yield to her wooden spade. 3 months had passed since they buried Thomas. 3 months since cholera swept through San Pedro and left her alone at 24 years old with nothing but a mortgage, an empty barn, and dreams that seemed to shrivel in the desert heat like tumbleweeds. The year was 1883, and the Arizona Territory stretched vast and unforgiving around her, a land that showed no mercy to women who tried to make it alone. Rose drove the spade down harder, ignoring how the handle bit into her palms. The banker had made it clear enough last week when she went to town for flour and coffee. 6 months. That was all the time she had to make the mortgage payment or lose everything. Thomas had been a dreamer, always talking about the cattle empire they would build, the children they would raise, the fortune they would make. Instead, he left her with debts and a plot of land that seemed determined to grow nothing but rattlesnakes and disappointment. She wanted to grow vegetables, something practical that might keep her fed through the winter and maybe provide enough extra to sell in town. Tomatoes, beans, squash, peppers. If she could get a garden established, if she could prove she could make something of this land, maybe the bank would give her more time. Maybe she could survive. The spade hit rock again, jarring her arms. Rose sat back on her heels and wiped her forehead with the back of her hand, leaving a streak of dirt across her brow. Her dark hair had escaped its bun and hung in damp strands around her face. The worn calico dress that had once been her best now served as her everyday clothing, and it clung to her thin frame with perspiration. That is not the right tool for breaking ground in this territory. Rose nearly jumped out of her skin. She spun around, one hand going to her throat, and found herself looking up at a man on horseback. He sat easy in the saddle, the reins loose in one hand, his other arm resting casually on his thigh. He was tall. She could tell that even with him mounted, with broad shoulders that filled out his blue work shirt. A wide-brimmed hat shaded his face, but she could see dark eyes watching her with what looked like concern rather than threat. He was perhaps 30, with sun-darkened skin and strong features that spoke of long hours working outdoors. A coiled rope hung from his saddle horn, and everything about him said rancher. "You startled me," Rose said, getting to her feet quickly. Her heart hammered in her chest, though whether from surprise or the fact that she was alone out here with a strange man, she could not quite say. "Can I help you with something?" "Isaac Edwards," the man said, touching the brim of his hat in greeting. "I have the ranch about 3 miles north of here, just past the ridge. I was riding fence line and saw you working. That ground has not been turned in years, maybe ever. You will break your back trying to dig it with that spade." Rose felt her cheeks flush, though whether from embarrassment or irritation she was not entirely sure. "I am managing well enough." Isaac swung down from his horse with practiced ease, standing a good head taller than her. He had an honest face, she noted despite herself, with lines around his eyes that came from squinting into the sun, and the kind of weathered look that came from hard work rather than hard living. "Madam, I mean no disrespect, but you have maybe turned over 3 square feet of ground in what looks like several hours of work. At that rate, it will be winter before you have a garden plot big enough to grow a single pumpkin." "Then I suppose I had better keep working instead of standing here talking," Rose said, hearing the defensive edge in her own voice and hating it. She did not want to be rude. Thomas had always said she had too much pride, that she needed to learn to accept help. But Thomas was not here anymore, and she had learned in these past 3 months that accepting help from men often came with expectations she had no intention of meeting. Isaac held up both hands as if surrendering. "I apologize. I did not ride over here to criticize. I have a breaking plow back at my ranch, heavy-duty tool that can cut through this caliche like butter. I could bring it over tomorrow morning, have this whole area turned and ready for planting by noon. No charge." Rose studied him carefully. He met her gaze directly, not looking away but not staring in that uncomfortable way some men did. His offer sounded genuine, but she had learned to be cautious. "Why would you do that?" "Because I remember what it was like starting out," Isaac said simply. "And because I knew Thomas. We were not close friends, but we talked a few times in town. He seemed like a good man. I am sorry for your loss." The mention of Thomas hit her like a physical blow, as it always did when people brought him up. Rose had to swallow hard before she could speak. "He was, thank you. So will you let me help? Just to get the ground broken. After that, the planting and tending is all yours." Rose wanted to say no. Every fiber of her being that had been hardened by loss and worry wanted to refuse. But she looked at the pitiful patch of earth she had managed to turn, at the wooden spade that was already starting to splinter, at the vast expanse of ground she still needed to cover, and pragmatism won over pride. Tomorrow morning would be acceptable. "Thank you, Mr. Edwards." "Isaac is fine," he said, that small smile returning. "And you are Rose, if I recall correctly." "Rose Zimmerman, yes." "Well then, Rose, I will see you tomorrow morning, probably around 8 if that suits you." 8 would be fine. Isaac touched his hat brim again, then swung back up into his saddle with that easy grace that spoke of a lifetime spent on horseback. "Until tomorrow, then." Rose watched him ride away, his horse kicking up small clouds of dust as they headed north. Only when he disappeared over a small rise did she turn back to her pathetic garden plot. She knelt and picked up the spade again, but after only a few minutes, she set it aside. There was no point in exhausting herself further if he was really coming tomorrow with proper equipment. She walked back to the house, her thoughts churning. Isaac Edwards. She had heard the name in town, she thought, though Thomas had never mentioned him directly. Someone had said something about the Edwards Ranch being one of the more successful operations in the area. Not huge, but well managed, with good breeding stock. A man like that surely had better things to do than help a struggling widow break ground for a vegetable garden. The inside of the adobe house was marginally cooler than outside, though not by much. The single main room served as kitchen, dining area, and living space, with a small bedroom off to one side. It was sparse, furnished with only what was absolutely necessary. Thomas had always said they would get better furniture once the ranch started paying, but that day had never come. Rose poured herself a cup of water from the bucket she kept by the door and drank it slowly. Through the small window, she could see the garden plot, the disturbed earth dark against the lighter desert soil. Tomorrow it would be ready for planting. Tomorrow she would be one step closer to making this place viable, to proving she could survive on her own. That night, she lay in bed and stared at the ceiling, listening to the coyotes howl in the distance and the wind rattling the shutters. She tried not to think about Thomas, about how he used to hold her at night, about the future they had planned that would never happen now. Instead, she thought about seed packets and irrigation, and whether the small creek that ran along the back of her property would have enough water through the summer to keep a garden alive. She did not think about Isaac Edwards, or she told herself she did not. But when sleep finally came, she dreamed of strong hands turning dark earth and a deep voice asking if she needed anything else. Rose woke before dawn, as had become her habit. There were animals to tend, though precious few of them now. She had sold most of the livestock to pay for Thomas's burial and to buy food to get through the winter. What remained were 3 chickens, a rooster, and an aging mule named Bartholomew that was too old and ornery for anyone to want to buy. She fed the chickens, collected 2 small eggs, and gave Bartholomew some of the precious hay she had left. The mule looked at her with what she interpreted as reproach, as if he too was disappointed in how their fortunes had turned. "I am doing my best," she told him, running a hand down his dusty neck. "We are all doing our best." Back in the house, she made coffee and fried the eggs with a slice of the bread she had baked 3 days ago. It was starting to go stale, but food was not something to waste. She ate slowly, trying to make the small meal feel like more than it was, then washed her dishes and tidied the already tidy house. By 7:30, she was pacing. She told herself it was because she was eager to get started on the garden. But if she was honest, there was an anticipation that had nothing to do with vegetables, and everything to do with the fact that she had not had a real conversation with anyone in weeks. San Pedro was 5 miles away, too far to walk casually, and she had sold the wagon. Bartholomew could be ridden, technically, but the old mule made his displeasure at being saddled known in ways that usually left Rose bruised and frustrated. At 8 o'clock exactly, she heard the sound of hooves and the creak of wagon wheels. Rose stepped out onto the small covered porch and shaded her eyes against the already bright sun. Isaac Edwards was driving a wagon pulled by 2 sturdy horses, and sure enough, in the back was a large iron plow that looked like it could break through bedrock if needed. "Morning," Isaac called out, pulling the horses to a stop near the garden plot. "Brought the plow like I promised, and also some well-rotted manure from my stock pens. Figured your soil could use the amendment." Rose walked over, eyeing the sacks in the wagon bed. "That is very generous. What do I owe you for all this?" Isaac jumped down from the wagon seat and began unhitching the plow. "Nothing. Like I said yesterday, I am just being neighborly. Mr. Edwards, I cannot accept charity." Rose hated how stiff she sounded, but she needed to be clear. "I appreciate your kindness, but I need to pay my own way." He paused in his work and looked at her, really looked at her, and Rose had to fight the urge to check her hair and smooth down her dress. She had put on her second-best dress this morning, the one that was less faded than her everyday wear, and had actually pinned her hair up properly. She told herself it was just because she did not want to look like a complete disaster in front of someone who was helping her, nothing more. "All right," Isaac said after a moment. "How about this? You make me lunch today while I am working, and we will call it even. I left my ranch before breakfast, and I am hungry enough to eat a horse, though I would prefer not to." Rose felt herself relax slightly. That was something she could do, something that felt like a fair exchange rather than charity. "I can do that. It will not be anything fancy." "Madam, I am a bachelor rancher. Anything I do not have to cook myself is fancy." There was that easy smile again, the one that crinkled the corners of his eyes and made him look younger than his years. Rose found herself smiling back before she could stop herself. "Well then, I will see what I can put together." She went back into the house, leaving Isaac to set up the plow. Through the window, she watched him work, noting the efficient way he moved, the obvious strength in his arms and shoulders as he maneuvered the heavy equipment. He had removed his hat while working, and she could see his dark hair was slightly long, curling at the nape of his neck. Rose pulled her attention away and focused on the task at hand. She had dried beans that she could cook with some salt pork, and there was still most of a loaf of bread. Not much, but filling. She put the beans on to simmer and mixed up a quick batch of biscuits with the last of her flour. She would need to go into town soon for supplies, which meant she would need money, which brought her right back to the endless worry that had become her constant companion. The sound of the plow cutting through earth was steady and somehow reassuring. Rose found herself timing her tasks to that rhythm, kneading biscuit dough in time with the scrape and turn of the blade through soil. It had been so long since there had been another person here, since the house had felt like anything other than a lonely box where she waited out her days. She put the biscuits in the oven of her wood-burning stove, checked the beans, and allowed herself another glance out the window. Isaac had already covered more ground than she had managed in 3 days of backbreaking work. The plow cut through the caliche layer like he had promised, turning up dark earth that looked rich and promising. He had attached the plow to Bartholomew, and miraculously, the old mule was cooperating, plodding along steadily without any of his usual stubbornness. By mid-morning, the smell of cooking beans and baking biscuits filled the small house. Rose set the table, such as it was, with her 2 plates, 2 cups, and 2 sets of utensils. She had not set a table for 2 people since Thomas died. The sight of those 2 plates facing each other made her throat tighten unexpectedly. She was saved from her thoughts by a knock at the door. "Madam." "Rose, I have the ground broken if you want to take a look." Rose wiped her hands on her apron and stepped outside. She stopped short at the sight before her. Where there had been hard, unyielding desert, there was now a large plot of turned earth, the dark soil exposed and ready for planting. It was more than she had dared hope for, easily large enough for all the vegetables she wanted to grow and then some. "This is wonderful," she said, and heard the thickness in her own voice. "I cannot thank you enough." Isaac was standing beside the plow, wiping his hands on a rag. His shirt was damp with sweat and his face was flushed from exertion, but he looked pleased with himself. "It is good soil under that hard layer. Should grow just about anything you want once we get that manure worked in. Want me to spread it before lunch?" "No, that can wait until after you eat." "Come inside. Everything is ready." Isaac followed her into the house, pausing at the door to stomp the worst of the dirt from his boots. Rose gestured to the wash basin she had set out, and he washed his hands and face, drying them on the towel she offered. It was all so strangely domestic, so normal, that for a moment Rose could almost pretend she was not alone, that she was just a wife making lunch for her husband who had been working their land. But Isaac was not Thomas, and this was not a normal day. She needed to remember that. They sat down at the small table, and Rose served the beans and biscuits, adding a small portion of precious butter that she had been hoarding. Isaac ate with the kind of focused dedication of a man who had been doing hard physical labor, but he was not uncouth about it. He had manners, she noticed. He used his napkin, did not talk with his mouth full, and complimented her cooking sincerely. "This is the best meal I have had in weeks," he said, sopping up the last of his beans with a piece of biscuit. "You are a fine cook, Rose." "It is just beans and biscuits," she said, but she felt pleased nonetheless. "Maybe, but they are good beans and biscuits." He leaned back in his chair, cradling his coffee cup in both hands. "So what are you planning to plant in that garden?" Rose began to describe her plans, talking about tomatoes and beans and squash, about how she hoped to have enough to sell in town, about the irrigation system she wanted to rig up from the creek. As she talked, she realized it was the first time she had spoken at length to another person in weeks. The words came tumbling out faster and faster, and if Isaac noticed her near desperation for conversation, he was kind enough not to mention it. Instead, he listened, asked questions, offered suggestions. He told her about a variety of pepper that did particularly well in Arizona heat, about the best way to keep rabbits from devastating a garden, about a farmer on the other side of San Pedro who sold seedlings for cheaper than the general store. They talked through lunch and beyond, until Rose noticed the angle of the sun and realized with a start that over an hour had passed. "I am so sorry. I have kept you from your work." "I am in no rush," Isaac said, but he stood and carried his plate to the wash basin. "But I should get that manure spread and worked in if you want to start planting soon. The earlier you get things in the ground, the better chance they have before the real summer heat hits." Rose followed him outside, and together they spread the manure over the turned earth. Isaac insisted on doing the heavy lifting, but Rose helped where she could, and they worked in companionable silence. When that was done, Isaac hitched the plow back up and made several more passes to work the amendment into the soil. By the time he was finished, the sun was past its zenith and heading toward the western horizon. The garden plot looked perfect, dark and rich and full of promise. Rose stood at the edge of it, imagining the rows of vegetables, the green plants heavy with fruit, the bounty that could save her home. "Thank you," she said, and this time she did not try to hide the emotion in her voice. "You have given me hope, Isaac. I had forgotten what that felt like." Isaac was unhitching Bartholomew from the plow, but he paused at her words. When he looked at her, there was something in his eyes that made her breath catch. "Everyone deserves hope, Rose, and everyone deserves a helping hand now and then." He finished putting away the equipment, loading the plow back into the wagon with an ease that made the heavy iron tool look weightless. Rose stood awkwardly, not sure what to say or do. Should she invite him to stay for supper? That seemed too forward. Should she thank him again? That seemed insufficient. Isaac made the decision for her. He climbed up into the wagon seat and gathered the reins, then paused and looked down at her. "I am going into San Pedro tomorrow to pick up some supplies. If you need anything, I would be happy to get it for you, save you the trip." "That is kind, but I should go myself eventually. I need to speak with the banker." Rose hated admitting that, hated revealing just how precarious her situation was. Something flickered across Isaac's face, too quick for her to read. "Well, if you change your mind, the offer stands. And Rose, if you need help with the planting or anything else, my ranch is just over that ridge. Do not hesitate to ask. I will not need to impose on you any further. You have already been far too generous." "It is not an imposition," Isaac said quietly. "It is my choice." He clicked to the horses and the wagon rolled forward. Rose watched him go, one hand raised in farewell, until the wagon disappeared from view. Only then did she turn back to look at her garden plot, at the physical evidence of Isaac Edwards's kindness. That night, she sat at her table with a pencil and paper, calculating and recalculating. Seeds would cost money. Water would require either hauling from the creek or building some kind of irrigation system, which would also cost money. And she still had the mortgage payment looming over everything like a thundercloud. But for the first time in months, the numbers did not seem quite so impossible. If the garden produced well, if she could sell the excess in town, if she could just hold on a little longer, maybe she could make it work. Rose went to bed that night feeling something she had almost forgotten. Not quite happiness, not yet, but something close. Something that felt almost like possibility. The next morning, Rose was up before dawn again, but this time with purpose. She needed to go into San Pedro, both to talk to the banker and to buy seeds. She had a small amount of money hidden in a tin under a loose floorboard, money she had been saving for emergencies. Seeds qualified as an emergency, she decided. The problem was getting to town. She eyed Bartholomew with trepidation. The mule stared back with that look of malicious intelligence that suggested he knew exactly what she was thinking and found it hilarious. "We need to do this," she told him firmly. "You are going to let me saddle you, and you are going to carry me to town, and you are not going to bite me or buck me off or roll on me or any of the other tricks you like to pull." Bartholomew flicked his ears and went back to eating hay. It took nearly an hour of struggle, but Rose finally got the old mule saddled. He only tried to step on her foot twice and bit at her once, which she counted as a victory. Mounting was another adventure entirely, as Bartholomew had a tendency to walk away just as she was swinging her leg over. But eventually she was seated, and they were headed down the dusty road toward San Pedro. The town was not much, just a collection of buildings huddled around a main street, as if seeking protection from the vast emptiness of the territory around them. There was a general store, a saloon, a church, a bank, a livery stable, and a handful of other businesses that served the ranchers and farmers scattered across the area. Rose hitched Bartholomew outside the general store and went inside. The proprietor, a balding man named Samuel Griffin, looked up from his ledger and smiled when he saw her. "Mrs. Zimmerman, good to see you. How are you getting along?" "Well enough, thank you. I need to buy some seeds, vegetable seeds. What do you have?" Samuel showed her what stock he had, and Rose selected carefully, counting out her precious coins for beans, squash, tomatoes, peppers, and lettuce. It made a depressing dent in her savings, but she tried not to think about that. "Will there be anything else?" Samuel asked as he wrapped the seed packets in brown paper. "No, that is all for today. Thank you, Samuel. You know, Mrs. Zimmerman, if you ever need credit just until things get better, I would be happy to extend it. Thomas was a good man, and I know these times have been hard for you." Rose felt the now familiar flush of shame mixed with gratitude. "That is very kind, but I am managing. Thank you, though." She left the store with her seeds clutched tightly and made her way to the bank, which was housed in a building that was slightly larger and more substantial than its neighbors, as if to project an air of stability and permanence. Rose paused outside, gathering her courage, then pushed through the door. The banker, William Chase, was a thin man with calculating eyes and a smile that never quite reached them. He looked up when Rose entered, and something that might have been irritation flickered across his face before being smoothed into professional courtesy. "Mrs. Zimmerman, what can I do for you today?" "I wanted to discuss my mortgage, Mr. Chase. I know the payment is coming due in a few months, and I wanted to assure you that I am taking steps to make sure I can pay." "What kind of steps?" His tone was not encouraging. "I am putting in a vegetable garden, a large one. I plan to sell the produce in town and use the profits toward my payment." William Chase leaned back in his chair and steepled his fingers, looking at her over the tops of them. "Mrs. Zimmerman, I appreciate your optimism, but I need to be frank with you. A vegetable garden, even a successful one, is not likely to generate the kind of income you need. The amount you owe is substantial, and my patience, along with the bank's, has limits." "I understand that, sir, but I am asking for a chance. Just give me until the harvest. If I cannot pay then, I will not fight the foreclosure." He studied her for a long moment, and Rose felt herself being assessed, measured, and found wanting. "Very well. You have until October 1st, but Mrs. Zimmerman, I strongly suggest you consider selling the property while you still can. There are buyers who would be interested, and you could walk away with something rather than nothing." "Thank you for your time, Mr. Chase." Rose stood, not trusting herself to say more without revealing how close she was to tears. She left the bank and stood on the wooden sidewalk, blinking in the bright sunlight. October 1st. That gave her about 5 months to plant, grow, harvest, and sell enough vegetables to make a mortgage payment that seemed impossibly large. She should have felt discouraged, should have felt defeated, but instead all she felt was determination. She would make this work. She had to. "Rose, is that you?" She turned to find Isaac Edwards walking toward her, leading his horse. He was dressed much as he had been the day before, work clothes and worn boots, but he had clearly cleaned up a bit. His face lit up when he saw her, that easy smile appearing. "Isaac, hello. I thought that was Bartholomew outside the general store. How did you manage to get him to bring you to town? Last I heard, that mule was more ornery than a bull with a burr under his tail." Despite everything, Rose found herself smiling. "We came to an understanding. He only tried to kill me twice on the way here." Isaac laughed, a warm sound that made something in Rose's chest loosen. "That is practically affectionate for Bartholomew. Are you heading home now? I could ride with you if you like. I am done with my business here." Rose hesitated. The proper thing would be to refuse, to thank him politely and go on her way. But the truth was, she did not want to refuse. She did not want to ride home alone, to return to her empty house and her worries with only Bartholomew for company. "That would be nice," she said, and meant it. They collected their animals and started down the road out of town, moving at the sedate pace that Bartholomew considered his maximum speed. Isaac's horse, a handsome bay gelding, clearly wanted to go faster but accepted the slow pace with good grace. "How did your meeting with the banker go?" Isaac asked after a few minutes. Rose glanced at him sharply. "What makes you think I was meeting with the banker? You came out of the bank looking like you wanted to either cry or punch something, possibly both. And I know Thomas had debts. Most people starting out do." There was no judgment in his voice, just statement of fact, and Rose felt the last of her defensiveness drain away. "I have until October to make my mortgage payment or I lose everything. William Chase was kind enough to make that very clear." "William Chase is not kind about anything," Isaac said flatly. "That man has foreclosed on more properties than anyone else in the territory, and he seems to enjoy it. Do not take anything he says to heart, Rose. That is easy to say, but the debt is real enough, and so is the deadline." They rode in silence for a while, the only sounds the clop of hooves and the creak of leather. The road stretched ahead of them, dusty and rutted, winding through landscape that was beautiful in its own harsh way. Saguaro cacti stood like sentinels against the blue sky, and in the distance, mountains rose purple and hazy. "How much do you need?" Isaac asked suddenly. Rose turned to stare at him. "I beg your pardon, for the mortgage payment. How much do you need?" "I am not asking you for money, Isaac." "I am not offering it," he said, but there was no sting in the words. "I am just trying to understand the situation. If you need help, I would like to know how to help." "I need to do this myself," Rose said, hearing the stubbornness in her own voice. "I need to prove I can survive on my own." "Why?" The simple question caught her off guard. "What do you mean, why?" "Because I am alone. Because I have no one else to rely on. Because if I cannot take care of myself, then what kind of person am I?" Isaac was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice was gentle. "Being alone does not mean refusing help, Rose. It just means you get to choose who you accept help from. And there is no shame in needing other people. We all need other people." Rose did not know what to say to that. They rode the rest of the way in silence, but it was not an uncomfortable silence. When they reached the turnoff to her property, Isaac pulled his horse to a stop. "I meant what I said yesterday. If you need anything, anything at all, my ranch is just over that ridge. Do not hesitate, Rose." "Why are you being so kind to me?" The question came out before she could stop it. "You do not know me. I am nothing to you. So why?" Isaac looked at her for a long moment, and there was something in his eyes that made her heart beat faster. "Maybe I would like to know you," he said quietly. "And maybe you are not nothing to me." Before she could respond, he touched his hat brim and rode away, leaving Rose sitting on Bartholomew, staring after him with her heart pounding and her thoughts in complete chaos. The next several days passed in a blur of hard work. Rose planted her garden with the care and precision of someone who knew their entire future depended on it. She laid out rows, spacing them according to the instructions on the seed packets. She planted tomatoes and beans and squash and peppers and lettuce, pressing each seed into the earth like a prayer. The watering was the hardest part. The creek at the back of her property had water, but getting that water to the garden meant hauling it bucket by bucket, trip after exhausting trip. By the end of the first day of watering, Rose's arms ached and her back screamed in protest. But the garden was damp and dark, the seeds settling into their new home. She fell into bed that night too tired to even think, but her dreams were full of green growing things and dark eyes that watched her with warmth. The next morning, she woke to the sound of hammering. Rose bolted upright, heart pounding. Someone was on her property. She grabbed the rifle Thomas had kept by the door and cautiously stepped outside. Isaac was at the creek, building something out of wood. He had apparently been working for some time, because there was already a structure taking shape, something that looked like a sluice or trough. His horse was tied to a nearby tree, watching the proceedings with the patient air of an animal used to waiting. "Isaac," Rose called out, lowering the rifle. "What are you doing?" He looked up, saw the rifle, and held up both hands with a grin. "Do not shoot. I am unarmed and mostly harmless." Despite herself, Rose smiled. "I am serious." "What is all this irrigation system?" Isaac said, gesturing at his work. "You cannot haul water by bucket all summer, Rose. You will work yourself to death. This will channel water from the creek to your garden. Simple gravity-fed system. Once it is built, all you will have to do is open the gate and water flows right where you need it." Rose walked closer, studying the structure with growing amazement. "How did you know I was having trouble with the watering?" "Because I have planted a garden before, and I know how much work it is. Figured I would save you some trouble." "Isaac." Rose set the rifle down and wrapped her arms around herself. "I do not know what to say. This is too much. The plow, the manure, and now this. I cannot repay you for all of this." Isaac put down his hammer and turned to face her. "I am not asking you to repay me. I am just being a neighbor. No neighbor is this generous without expecting something in return." The words came out harsher than she intended, but they needed to be said. Rose had learned to be suspicious of generosity, had learned that people, especially men, rarely did something for nothing. Isaac's expression shifted, and for the first time she saw something that might have been hurt in his eyes. "What is it you think I want, Rose?" "Because I will tell you right now, I am not expecting or asking for anything except maybe another one of your good meals sometime." "I do not know what you want," Rose said quietly. "That is what scares me." He was quiet for a long moment, his gaze steady on hers. "I want to help you, that is all. I want to see you succeed because you deserve to succeed. And maybe, if I am being completely honest, I want to spend more time around you because I enjoy your company. But that is as far as it goes, Rose. I am not trying to manipulate you or take advantage. I am just trying to be decent." Rose felt tears prick at her eyes and blinked them back furiously. "I am sorry. That was unfair of me. I am not used to people being decent without strings attached." "Then maybe it is time you got used to it." Isaac's voice was gentle. "Now, are you going to help me with this irrigation system, or are you going to stand there looking suspicious?" Rose found herself laughing despite the emotional whiplash of the conversation. "I suppose I could help. What do you need me to do?" They worked together for the rest of the morning, and Rose found herself relaxing into the rhythm of it. Isaac explained what he was doing as he worked, showing her how the system would function, how she could control the water flow, how she could adjust it as the plants grew and their needs changed. He was a good teacher, patient and clear, and Rose found herself absorbing the information eagerly. By midday, the basic structure was in place. Isaac opened the gate he had built, and water began flowing down the wooden trough, heading toward the garden. Rose watched in amazement as the system he had built carried the creek water right to the edge of her planted rows. "Tomorrow I will come back and finish the distribution system," Isaac said, wiping sweat from his forehead. "That will let you water individual rows as needed, but this should get you started." "Stay for lunch," Rose heard herself say. "Please, it is the least I can do." Isaac smiled, that warm smile that made her feel like the sun had come out from behind clouds. "I would like that." They walked back to the house together, and Rose put together a simple meal of fried eggs and leftover biscuits. It was not much, but Isaac ate like it was a feast. They talked as they ate. Easy conversation about the weather, about Isaac's ranch, about San Pedro and its characters. Isaac told her about his foreman, a grizzled old cowboy named Pete who had forgotten more about cattle than most people would ever know. He told her about his plans to expand his herd, about the breeding program he was developing to create cattle better suited to the harsh Arizona climate. Rose found herself telling him about her life before Thomas, about growing up in Missouri, about how she and Thomas had met at a church social and married within 6 months before heading west to seek their fortune. She told him about the dreams they had shared, about the family they had hoped to build. "You miss Missouri?" Isaac asked. Rose considered the question. "Sometimes, but I think what I miss is the idea of home more than the actual place. Missouri was where my family was, but they are all gone now. Parents died of fever when I was 19. I had no siblings. Thomas was my family, and then he was gone too. So no, I suppose I do not miss Missouri specifically. I just miss belonging somewhere." "You belong here," Isaac said quietly. "This is your home now, Rose. Your land, your house, your garden. You belong here as much as anyone. Only if I can keep it. You will keep it. I believe that." His confidence in her was both touching and terrifying. Rose wanted to believe him, wanted to believe that everything would work out, but her life had taught her to be cautious with hope. After lunch, Isaac went back to work on the irrigation system while Rose tended to her other chores. She found herself constantly aware of his presence, of the sound of hammering and sawing, of glimpses of him through the window as she worked inside the house. It was strange having someone else here, but it was not unpleasant. The house felt less lonely, less like a box where she was storing herself until the next disaster struck. By late afternoon, Isaac had finished the rough work on the irrigation system. He promised to return the next day to complete it, refused her offer of payment, and rode away with a wave and a smile that stayed with Rose long after he had gone. That night, as she lay in bed, Rose allowed herself to think about Isaac Edwards in a way she had not let herself think about any man since Thomas died. He was handsome, yes, but it was more than that. He was kind without being condescending, helpful without being pushy, strong without being aggressive. He treated her like an equal, like someone with a brain and opinions worth listening to. And if she was completely honest with herself, she was attracted to him in a way that made her feel guilty and excited in equal measure. It had only been 3 months since Thomas died. Was that long enough to grieve? Was it appropriate to feel this fluttering in her chest when Isaac smiled at her? Rose rolled over and pressed her face into her pillow. She did not know the answers to any of these questions. All she knew was that Isaac Edwards made her feel alive in a way she had not felt in a very long time, and she did not know what to do with that feeling. True to his word, Isaac returned the next day to finish the irrigation system. This time, Rose was ready for him, and they worked together from the start, laying out the distribution channels that would carry water to each row of the garden. It was ingenious, Rose thought, the way he had designed it so that she could control exactly where the water went and how much reached each plant. "Where did you learn to do all this?" she asked as they fitted together another section of wooden trough. "Trial and error mostly," Isaac said. "When I first started the ranch, I tried to grow some crops to supplement the cattle income. Had to figure out how to water them without killing myself in the process. This system is based on what I built then, just scaled down for a garden instead of a field." "Why did you stop growing crops?" "Decided to focus on the cattle. It was more profitable and frankly, I am better with animals than I am with plants. But I am glad I learned because it means I can help you now." They worked in companionable silence for a while, the desert heat building around them. Rose found herself acutely aware of Isaac's presence, of the way his shirt stretched across his shoulders when he bent to work, of the quiet competence with which he moved. She tried not to stare, but it was difficult. "Can I ask you something?" Isaac said suddenly, breaking into her thoughts. "Of course. Why did Thomas choose this land? It is not bad land, but it is isolated. Most of the homesteads are closer to San Pedro or at least closer to other ranches." Rose sat back on her heels, wiping sweat from her forehead. "Thomas liked the isolation. He said we would build our own empire, that we did not need to be close to anyone else. I think he wanted to prove he could make it on his own without help from anyone." "And how did that work out?" The question was not unkind, but it stung nonetheless. "Not well, obviously. Thomas was proud, maybe too proud. He would not ask for help even when we needed it, and in the end his pride killed him." Isaac looked at her sharply. "Cholera killed him, Rose. That was not his fault. But if we had been closer to town, closer to a doctor, maybe he would have had a chance. Instead, by the time I got to San Pedro and back with help, it was too late." Rose heard her voice break and hated herself for it. She had cried enough over Thomas. She was done crying. Isaac put down the tool he was holding and moved closer, not touching her, but near enough that she could feel the warmth of him. "You cannot think like that. You will drive yourself mad with what-ifs. Thomas made his choices, and those choices were not your fault. None of this is your fault, Rose." "Then why does it feel like it is?" "Because you are human, and humans always blame themselves for things they cannot control. But that does not make it true." Rose looked up at him, meeting his dark eyes. There was understanding there, and sympathy, but also something else, something that made her breath catch. They were very close, she realized. Close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes, close enough that she could count the tiny lines at the corners of his mouth. For a moment she thought he might kiss her. For a moment she wanted him to. But then Isaac stepped back, clearing his throat, and the moment passed. "We should finish this," he said, his voice slightly rough. "I want to test it before I leave, make sure it works properly." They completed the irrigation system, and Isaac showed Rose how to operate it. Water flowed exactly where it was needed, running down the rows of her garden with perfect precision. It was beautiful, Rose thought. It was hope made manifest in wood and water. "Thank you," she said when they were done. "I do not have words for how much this means to me, Isaac." "You do not need words," he said. "Just succeed, Rose. Grow your garden, make your money, keep your land. That will be thanks enough." He left shortly after, and Rose stood in her garden, watching the water flow and thinking about the man who had built this for her. Isaac Edwards was changing her life in ways both large and small, and she was not sure if she should be grateful or terrified. Probably both, she decided. The days fell into a pattern after that. Rose tended her garden carefully, watering and weeding and watching for the first signs of growth, and Isaac found reasons to stop by. He was checking on the irrigation system, he said. He had extra tools he thought she might need. He was riding fence line and her property was on the way. The excuses were transparent, but Rose found she did not mind. She looked forward to his visits, to the conversation and companionship they brought. 10 days after she planted, the first sprouts appeared. Rose knelt in the dirt and stared at the tiny green shoots pushing up through the dark earth, and she felt tears streaming down her face. They were alive. They were growing. She had created this. She looked up to find Isaac watching her from his horse. She had not heard him approach, had been too focused on the miracle of new life in her garden. "They came up," she said unnecessarily. "They did," Isaac agreed, swinging down from his saddle. He walked over and crouched beside her, studying the sprouts with a smile. "Healthy looking, too." "You are going to have a fine garden, Rose. I could not have done it without you." "Sure you could have. It just would have taken longer and been harder, but you would have done it." Rose looked at him, at this man who had given her so much for no reason other than kindness. "Why are you so good to me, Isaac?" He was quiet for a moment, still looking at the sprouts. When he spoke, his voice was soft. "My father died when I was 16, left my mother with the ranch and 3 kids to raise. Everyone said she should sell, that she could not possibly run a cattle operation on her own. But she was stubborn, and she had good neighbors who helped her. They taught me how to ranch, how to manage the business, how to be a man. By the time I was 20, we were doing well enough that I could start buying my own stock. When I was 25, I bought my own land and started my own ranch. Everything I have because people helped my mother when she needed it." He finally looked at her, and the intensity in his eyes made her heart skip. "So when I see a woman trying to make it on her own, trying to hold onto her land and her dignity and her future, I help. Because someone helped my mother and therefore helped me. It is as simple as that." "It is not simple at all," Rose said quietly. "It is extraordinary. No, it is just being human, or at least it is being the kind of human I want to be." They stayed there for a long moment, kneeling side by side in the dirt, looking at the tiny green sprouts that represented hope and future. Rose felt something shift inside her, some wall she had built around her heart beginning to crack. "Would you like to stay for dinner?" she heard herself ask. "It is not much, just stew, but there is plenty." Isaac smiled, that warm smile that made her feel like she was the only person in the world. "I would love to." They walked back to the house together, and Rose put the stew on to heat while Isaac washed up. It felt natural, having him here, having someone to cook for and talk to. The house did not feel so empty with him in it. Over dinner, Isaac told her more about his ranch, about the struggles and triumphs of building something from nothing. Rose found herself sharing more about her own life, about her fears and hopes for the future. The conversation flowed easily, and Rose realized with a start that she had not felt this comfortable with anyone in a long time, maybe ever. Thomas had been a good man, but he had not been much of a talker. He had kept his thoughts and feelings to himself, and Rose had learned not to push. Isaac was different. He talked openly about his feelings, about his failures and successes, about his hopes and dreams. And he listened when she talked, really listened, asking questions and engaging with what she said. After dinner, they sat on the small porch, watching the sun set over the desert. The sky turned brilliant shades of orange and pink and purple, colors so vivid they seemed unreal. A cool breeze had picked up, offering relief from the day's heat. "I should go," Isaac said eventually, though he made no move to stand. "It will be dark soon." "You could stay," Rose said, then felt her cheeks flame. "I mean, you could stay for coffee or water. Not stay, just stay for a bit longer." Isaac turned to look at her, and there was amusement in his eyes, but also something warmer. "I would like that. Coffee sounds good." Rose fled into the house, grateful for the excuse to hide her burning face. What was wrong with her? She was acting like a schoolgirl with her first crush. She was a widow, for heaven's sake, a woman of 24 years who had been married and lost everything. She should have more dignity. But when she returned with the coffee and handed Isaac his cup, and their fingers brushed together, she felt that same flutter in her chest that she had felt at 16 when Johnny Miller asked her to dance at the Harvest Festival. Some things, apparently, did not change with age or experience. They talked long into the evening until the stars came out in their full glory, scattered across the black velvet of the sky like diamonds. Isaac told her about the constellations, pointing out formations and telling the stories behind their names. Rose listened, watching the stars but more aware of the man beside her, of his presence and warmth. Finally, Isaac stood to leave. "I really should go. I have an early start tomorrow, and Pete will have my hide if I am not there to help with the branding." Rose walked him to his horse. "Thank you for coming. For the dinner, I mean, for the company." "Thank you for having me," Isaac said, swinging up into the saddle. Then he paused, looking down at her in the moonlight. "Rose, I want to be clear about something. I know you are still grieving Thomas, and I respect that. I am not trying to rush you into anything or make you uncomfortable. But I enjoy spending time with you. I like you. And when you are ready, if you are ever ready, I would like to court you properly. No pressure, no expectations. Just a statement of intent." Rose stared up at him, her heart pounding so hard she was sure he must be able to hear it. "Isaac, I do not know what to say." "You do not have to say anything right now. Just think about it. And Rose, no matter what you decide, I will still be your friend and your neighbor. That does not change." He rode away before she could respond, leaving Rose standing in the moonlight, her thoughts and emotions in complete chaos. Isaac wanted to court her. He liked her. And God help her, she liked him too. More than liked him if she was being honest with herself. But was it too soon? Thomas had only been dead 3 months. What would people think? What would she think of herself? Rose went back into the house and lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. She thought about Thomas, about their marriage and their dreams. She had loved him, truly loved him, but if she was brutally honest with herself, it had not been a passionate love. It had been comfortable, safe, the love of two people who liked each other and wanted similar things from life. What she was beginning to feel for Isaac was different. It was exciting and terrifying. It made her heart race and her palms sweat. It made her feel alive in a way she had not felt in years. Was that wrong? Was it a betrayal of Thomas's memory to feel this way? Rose did not know the answers, but as she finally drifted off to sleep, one thought kept circling in her mind. Isaac Edwards had asked to court her, and she wanted to say yes. The next week passed in a blur of work and anticipation. Rose's garden was thriving, the plants growing visibly day by day. She tended them carefully, watering and weeding and watching for pests. Her vegetables were going to be the finest in San Pedro. She was determined about that. Isaac did not visit for several days, and Rose tried to tell herself she was not disappointed. He had his own ranch to run, his own work to do. He could not be expected to spend all his time helping her, but she missed him. She missed his easy smile and his steady presence. She missed the conversations and the companionship. She missed the way he made her feel like she was not alone in the world. On the 7th day, Rose was in the garden when she heard hoofbeats. She straightened, shading her eyes against the sun, and felt her heart leap when she saw Isaac riding toward her. "Hello, stranger," she called out, proud of how steady her voice sounded. "Hello yourself," Isaac said, dismounting. "Sorry I have not been by. We were branding and it took longer than expected. How is the garden? Come see for yourself." They walked through the rows together, Isaac examining the plants with an expert eye. "These look excellent, Rose. You have a knack for this. Another month and you will be harvesting." "I hope so. I need this to work, Isaac." "It will work. You are doing everything right." They walked back toward the house, and Rose found herself gathering her courage. She had thought about little else for the past week, and she had made her decision. "Isaac, about what you said the other night, about courting me." He stopped walking and turned to face her, his expression carefully neutral. "You do not have to give me an answer, Rose. I told you there is no pressure." "I want to give you an answer," Rose said, her heart pounding. "I have thought about it a lot, and I think I would like that. I would like to be courted by you, if the offer is still open." The smile that spread across Isaac's face was like the sun breaking through clouds. "The offer is very much still open. Are you sure?" "I am sure," Rose said, and found that she was. "It has only been 3 months since Thomas died, and maybe that is too soon. Maybe people will talk, but I do not care. You make me happy, Isaac. You make me feel alive. And life is too short and too hard to turn away from happiness when it offers itself." Isaac took a step closer, his eyes searching hers. "I will not replace Thomas, Rose. I am not trying to, I know. And I am not asking you to. But Thomas is gone and I am still here. I am still alive and I want to live. I want to be happy, and I think I could be happy with you." "I think I could be happy with you too," Isaac said softly. Then, moving slowly as if giving her time to pull away, he reached out and took her hand. His palm was warm and calloused against hers, his grip gentle but firm. They stood there for a long moment, hands clasped, looking at each other in the bright Arizona sunlight. Rose felt tears prick at her eyes, but this time they were not tears of grief or fear. They were tears of hope, of possibility, of a future that suddenly seemed less impossible. "So what happens now?" she asked. "Now I court you properly," Isaac said, "which means I take you on picnics and bring you flowers and generally try to convince you that I am worthy of your affection." "You already bring me flowers," Rose pointed out. "Or at least, you bring me things to plant that will become flowers. Those are practical flowers. I am talking about impractical flowers, the kind that just look pretty and serve no purpose other than to make you smile." "I would like that," Rose said softly. Isaac squeezed her hand gently, then released it. "I should go. Pete will be wondering where I am, but I will be back tomorrow and I will bring those impractical flowers. I look forward to it." Rose watched him ride away, her hand still tingling from his touch. She felt lighter than she had in months, as if some heavy burden had been lifted from her shoulders. She was still alone, still facing an impossible deadline to save her land, still dealing with grief and worry and 1,000 practical concerns. But for the first time since Thomas died, she felt like she might have a partner in facing those challenges. She felt like she might not be alone after all. True to his word, Isaac returned the next day with a bouquet of wildflowers that must have taken him hours to gather. They were beautiful, a riot of colors that looked like a piece of the desert sunset brought to her door. Rose put them in a jar of water on her table, and every time she looked at them, she smiled. Isaac courted her with a patience and gentleness that touched her deeply. He visited regularly, always bringing something with him. Sometimes it was something practical like fresh meat from his ranch or a tool she needed. Sometimes it was something frivolous like flowers or a ribbon for her hair that he saw in the general store. They talked for hours, learning about each other, sharing stories and dreams and fears. He was careful never to push for more than she was ready to give. When he took her hand, it was always gently, always giving her time to pull away if she wanted. When he sat close to her on the porch in the evenings, he respected her space, never crowding or presuming. The people of San Pedro, naturally, began to talk. Rose heard the whispers when she went to town, saw the speculative glances and knowing looks. Some were kind, saying it was good that Rose had found someone to help her. Others were less kind, muttering about how quickly she had forgotten poor Thomas, how unseemly it was for a widow to be courting so soon after her husband's death. Rose tried not to let it bother her, but it was hard. She was not immune to gossip or judgment. No matter how much she told herself, she did not care what people thought. Isaac heard the gossip too, of course. San Pedro was too small for secrets. He brought it up one evening as they sat on her porch watching the sunset. "Does it bother you what people are saying?" Rose considered the question. "Yes," she said honestly. "I wish they would mind their own business and let me live my life, but I am not going to let their opinions dictate my choices. I have spent too much of my life worrying about what other people think." "Good," Isaac said firmly, "because they do not know anything about your situation or your feelings. They did not watch you struggle alone these past months. They did not see how hard you have worked or how much courage it has taken for you to keep going. Their opinions do not matter, Rose. Only yours does." "And yours," Rose said softly. "Your opinion matters to me." Isaac turned to look at her, and there was something in his eyes that made her breath catch. "My opinion is that you are the strongest, bravest, most remarkable woman I have ever met, and I count myself lucky that you are giving me a chance to know you better." Rose felt heat rise in her cheeks, but she held his gaze. "I count myself lucky too." They sat in companionable silence as the sun sank lower, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and gold. Rose felt a contentment she had not experienced in a long time. For this moment, at least, everything was perfect. As summer deepened, Rose's garden flourished. The plants grew tall and strong, responding to her careful tending. Tiny green tomatoes appeared on the vines, beans hung in clusters from their stalks, and the squash plants spread their large leaves wide, promising future bounty. Every morning, Rose walked through her rows, marveling at what she had created from nothing but seeds and hope and hard work. Isaac continued to visit regularly, and their relationship deepened. They moved from holding hands to stolen kisses on the porch in the twilight. Rose felt like a girl again, giddy and excited and nervous all at once. Isaac was patient, never pushing for more than she was ready to give, but the attraction between them was undeniable. Sometimes Rose would catch him looking at her with such warmth in his eyes that it made her heart skip a beat. One evening in early July, Isaac arrived with a basket covered with a cloth. "Pack a bag," he said with a mysterious smile. "We are going on an adventure." "An adventure? Isaac, I have work to do. I cannot just leave. Your garden will survive one evening without you. Come on, Rose." When was the last time you did something just for fun? She could not remember, honestly. Fun had not been a priority in her life for a long time. "Where are we going? You will see. Trust me." Rose looked at his eager face, at the excitement in his eyes, and found she could not refuse. "All right. Give me a minute to change." She went inside and changed into her better dress, the one she usually saved for church. It was a simple dress in a soft blue fabric that Thomas had bought for her birthday 2 years ago. She pinned up her hair properly and even dabbed on a bit of the lavender water she had been hoarding. When she emerged, Isaac's face lit up. "You look beautiful." "I look like I always look," Rose said, but she was pleased nonetheless. "No, you look like sunshine and springtime. Come on." He helped her up onto his horse, then swung up behind her. Rose was acutely aware of his arm around her waist, of his chest pressed against her back, of his breath warm against her ear. They rode out across the desert, heading toward the mountains that rose purple in the distance. After about 30 minutes, Isaac guided the horse off the main path and up a narrow trail. They climbed higher, and the air grew marginally cooler. Finally, they emerged onto a small plateau that overlooked the valley. The view was breathtaking. Rose could see for miles, the desert stretching out below them in shades of gold and brown and green, with the town of San Pedro visible as a small cluster of buildings in the distance. Isaac dismounted and helped her down, then retrieved the basket. He spread a blanket on the ground and began unpacking food. There was cold chicken, fresh bread, cheese, fruit, and even a small bottle of wine. "Isaac, this is wonderful. When did you prepare all this?" "I had help," he admitted. "Pete's wife Mary is a much better cook than I am. I told her I wanted to do something special for you, and she insisted on packing the basket herself." They sat on the blanket and ate as the sun began to set. The light was extraordinary, turning the whole world gold and pink and purple. Rose had never seen anything so beautiful. "Thank you for this," she said softly. "I did not realize how much I needed to get away, just for a little while." "Everyone needs to get away sometimes," Isaac said. "And I wanted to spend time with you away from your property, away from the work and the worry. I wanted you to just be Rose, not Rose the widow or Rose the struggling homesteader. Just Rose." She looked at him, at this man who kept surprising her with his thoughtfulness and kindness. Just Rose, like spending time with just Isaac. He smiled and took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. They sat like that as the sun set, watching the colors change and shift across the sky. When the first stars began to appear, Isaac shifted closer. "Rose, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "You ever think about the future? About what you want your life to look like a year from now, 5 years from now?" Rose was quiet for a moment. "I try not to think too far ahead. Right now, I am focused on making it to October, on making my mortgage payment. Everything beyond that feels too uncertain to plan for." "But if you could plan for it, if you knew you would make it through this rough patch, what would you want?" Rose looked out at the darkening landscape, thinking. "I would want to keep my land. I would want my garden to keep growing, maybe expand it. I would want to feel secure, to know that I could take care of myself, and I would want—" She paused, uncertain if she should say it. "What else would you want?" Isaac prompted gently. "I would want to not be alone," Rose said quietly. "I would want companionship, love. Maybe even a family someday. I know that might sound foolish given my situation, but yes, I would want all of that." Isaac squeezed her hand. "That does not sound foolish at all. That sounds like exactly what you deserve." He turned to face her more fully, and even in the growing darkness, she could see the intensity in his eyes. "Rose, I need to tell you something. I know we have only been courting for a few weeks. I know this might be too soon. But I am not a man who beats around the bush, and I need you to know how I feel." Rose's heart began to pound. "Isaac, I am falling in love with you," he said simply. "Maybe I have been since the first day I saw you trying to dig that garden with that inadequate spade, too stubborn and proud to ask for help. You are brave and strong and kind, and being with you makes me happier than I have been in years. I know you are still dealing with your grief over Thomas, and I am not asking you to say anything back. I just needed you to know." Rose felt tears welling up, but this time they were tears of joy rather than sorrow. "Isaac, I am falling in love with you too. I did not think I could feel this way again, not so soon, maybe not ever. But you make me feel alive. You make me believe that good things can still happen, that the future can be bright instead of just something to be endured." "Rose," Isaac breathed, and then he was kissing her, really kissing her for the first time. It was nothing like the chaste kisses they had shared on her porch. This was passionate and deep, a kiss that spoke of longing and hope and desire. Rose felt like she was falling, but Isaac held her steady, his arms strong and sure around her. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Isaac rested his forehead against hers. I want to be with you, Rose. Not just as your friend or your neighbor or even just as the man who is courting you. I want to be your partner in every sense of the word. I want to help you save your land. I want to build a future with you. I want to wake up next to you every morning for the rest of my life. Is this a proposal? Rose asked, her voice shaking. Not yet, Isaac said. Not until you are ready. But it is a promise that a proposal is coming whenever you are prepared to hear it. I just wanted you to know my intentions, to know that this is not a casual thing for me. You are not a casual thing for me, Rose. You are everything. Rose kissed him again, pouring all of her feelings into it, all of her hope and fear and love. When they broke apart this time, she was smiling through her tears. I think I could be ready soon. I think I am almost there. Then I will wait, Isaac said, however long you need. They stayed on the plateau until full dark, talking and kissing and planning a future that suddenly seemed possible. When they finally rode back to Rose's house, she felt like she was floating. The practical concerns were still there, the mortgage and the money and all the rest of it. But they seemed less overwhelming now. With Isaac by her side, she felt like she could face anything. The next morning, Rose was in her garden when she heard the sound of multiple horses approaching. She straightened, shading her eyes, and felt her stomach clench when she saw William Chase, the banker, riding toward her property. He was not alone. There were two other men with him, rough-looking types who watched her with cold eyes. Rose set down her hoe and walked to meet them, her heart pounding. "Mr. Chase, this is a surprise. Mrs. Zimmerman." William Chase did not dismount. He looked down at her from his horse, and there was something unpleasant in his expression. "I have come to discuss your mortgage. I have until October to make my payment. We agreed on that." "Circumstances have changed," William said flatly. "I have a buyer interested in your property. He is willing to pay cash immediately. I think you should take his offer." "I am not interested in selling. Mrs. Zimmerman, be reasonable. You cannot possibly make the payment you owe. This garden of yours is not going to generate enough income. You are delaying the inevitable." "I have until October," Rose repeated, keeping her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her. "That was our agreement, and I intend to honor it. I expect you to do the same." Something ugly flashed across William Chase's face. "October, then. But when you fail to pay, and you will fail, do not expect any mercy from me. I have extended you more courtesy than I needed to." He wheeled his horse around and rode off, his companions following. Rose stood there, watching them go, her hands shaking. October 1st. Less than 3 months away. It had seemed like plenty of time before, but suddenly it felt terrifyingly close. That evening, when Isaac came by as he had taken to doing most nights, Rose told him about William Chase's visit. Isaac's face darkened as she spoke. "He has no right to pressure you like that. You have until October, and he has to honor that agreement. He said he has a buyer." "Isaac, what if I cannot do this? What if I lose everything anyway?" Isaac took her hands in his, looking into her eyes with fierce determination. "You are not going to lose everything. We are not going to let that happen. We? Yes, we. Rose, I know you want to do this on your own, and I respect that. But you do not have to do it completely alone. Let me help. Not with money," he added quickly as she opened her mouth to protest, "but with advice, with planning. Let me use my connections in town to help you find buyers for your produce. Let me help you figure out how much you need to grow and sell to make your payment." Rose wanted to refuse, wanted to insist she could handle it herself. But the fear from William Chase's visit was still fresh, and the truth was, she needed help. "All right. Yes, please help me." They spent the evening going over her finances, calculating how much she owed and how much she would need to earn from her garden. The numbers were daunting, but with Isaac's help, Rose began to see a path forward. If the garden produced well, if she could sell the vegetables at a good price, if everything went right, she might just make it. "It is possible," Isaac said finally. "It will not be easy, but it is possible. And if it is not enough, if I come up short—" Isaac was quiet for a moment. "Then we figure out another way. Rose, I meant what I said last night. I want a future with you. That means your problems are my problems. We face them together. I cannot ask you to risk your ranch to save mine. You are not asking, I am offering, but let us not borrow trouble. Your garden is doing well. We have time. Let us focus on making this work." Rose nodded, feeling some of her panic subside. With Isaac beside her, things did not seem quite so impossible. July bled into August, and the heat became almost unbearable. Rose worked in her garden in the early morning and late evening to avoid the worst of it. Her vegetables were thriving despite the heat, or perhaps because of it. The tomatoes ripened to brilliant red, the peppers developed their full flavor, and the squash grew large and heavy. Isaac helped her harvest the first of her crop, and together they loaded the vegetables into his wagon and took them to town. Rose had worried that no one would buy, that she would be competing with the other farmers and losing. But Isaac had been talking to people, spreading the word about Rose's garden and the quality of her produce. They sold everything within hours. Rose stood in the town square, coins heavy in her pocket, and felt tears of relief streaming down her face. It was not enough for the mortgage payment, not yet, but it was a start. It was proof that her plan could work. "See," Isaac said, putting an arm around her shoulders. "I told you it would be fine." Over the next few weeks, Rose fell into a rhythm. Harvest, sell, plant more. Her garden was producing continuously now, and the money was accumulating. It was still going to be close, she knew that. Even with her best projections, she would be cutting it very close to her payment deadline. But it was possible. She could do this. Her relationship with Isaac deepened as well. He was at her house almost every day now, helping with the harvest, sharing meals, sitting with her on the porch in the evenings. They talked about everything and nothing, sharing their pasts and their hopes for the future. Isaac told her about his dreams of expanding his ranch, of building a herd that would be known throughout the territory. Rose told him about her desire to make her little piece of land into something beautiful and productive, a place where things grew instead of just survived. One evening in late August, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Isaac took Rose's hand and looked at her with an expression that made her heart skip. "Rose, I need to ask you something." "What is it?" "That future I keep talking about, the one I want to build with you. I think it is time we started building it, officially." Rose's breath caught. "Isaac," he slid off his chair and knelt in front of her, still holding her hand. "Rose Zimmerman, I love you. I love your strength and your courage and your stubborn refusal to give up even when everything seems impossible. I love the way you talk to your chickens and the way you bite your lip when you are concentrating. I love every single thing about you. And I want to spend the rest of my life with you if you will have me." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a ring. It was simple, a thin band of gold with a small blue stone set in it. "This was my grandmother's ring. She wore it for 50 years of marriage to my grandfather. My mother gave it to me before she died, told me to save it for when I found someone worth spending a lifetime with. I have found that someone, Rose. Will you marry me?" Rose looked at him, this man who had come into her life and changed everything. She thought about Thomas, about the grief that still lingered in the corners of her heart. But that grief did not negate what she felt for Isaac. She could honor Thomas's memory and still build a new life. She could love again. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking. "Yes, Isaac, I will marry you." Isaac slipped the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly. Then he stood and pulled her into his arms, kissing her with a passion that made her dizzy. When they broke apart, both were laughing and crying at the same time. "When?" Isaac asked. "When can we get married?" Rose thought about the practical concerns, about the mortgage and the money and everything else. "After October 1st, after I make my payment and know the land is secure, I want to come to our marriage without that hanging over my head. Is that all right?" "That is fine," Isaac said. "That is perfect. That gives me time to expand my house, to build on an addition for you and your things. And Rose, after we are married, if you want to keep your land, we will keep it. We will work both properties. Or if you want to sell it, we can do that too. Whatever you want, we will figure it out together." "I want to keep it," Rose said without hesitation. "That land represents everything I have been fighting for. I want to keep it and make it into something beautiful." "Then that is what we will do." They stayed up late into the night, making plans and dreaming about the future. When Isaac finally left, riding back to his ranch in the moonlight, Rose stood on her porch and looked at the ring on her finger. She was engaged. She was going to be married. She was going to have a partner and a future, and maybe even someday, a family. The thought filled her with joy so profound it was almost painful. September arrived, bringing cooler temperatures and the home stretch of Rose's race to save her land. Her garden continued to produce, and every week she and Isaac loaded up the wagon and sold vegetables in San Pedro. The pile of money hidden under her floorboard grew steadily. The people of San Pedro had noticed the ring on Rose's finger, and the gossip mill went into overdrive. Most people were happy for her and Isaac, or at least pretended to be. A few, like the banker William Chase, made their disapproval known. "Marrying him will not save your land," William told her one day when she encountered him outside the general store. "You still owe that payment, and it is due in full on October 1st. "I am aware of my obligations, Mr. Chase," Rose said coldly, "and I will meet them. We will see," he said, and walked away. Rose tried not to let him get to her, but it was hard. She was cutting it so close. By her calculations, she would have just enough, maybe a little more if the last few weeks of harvest went well. But there was no room for error, no cushion if something went wrong. As if sensing her worry, Isaac increased his visits, helping with the harvest and the sales, offering support and encouragement. He also began working on the addition to his house, a new bedroom and a sitting room that would be Rose's space when she moved in. "I want you to have a place that is yours," he explained when he showed her the plans. "Not just Thomas's widow moving into my house, but Rose making her home with me. You should have a space to put your things, to be yourself." Rose loved him even more for that thoughtfulness. She began to relax into the idea of marriage, to look forward to it rather than seeing it as just a practical arrangement. She loved Isaac, truly loved him, and she was excited to start their life together. But first, she had to save her land. The final days of September were a blur of activity. Rose harvested everything that was ready, selling every last tomato and pepper and squash. Isaac helped her count her money, and together they calculated that she had just enough. It would take every penny she had saved, with barely anything left over, but she could make the mortgage payment. On the morning of October 1st, Rose dressed in her best clothes and carefully counted out the money she owed. Isaac arrived early to drive her into town, and together they made the trip to San Pedro. William Chase was in his office, looking unsurprised to see them. "Mrs. Zimmerman." "Mr. Edwards, I assume you are here to discuss the foreclosure." "I am here to make my mortgage payment," Rose said, setting the carefully counted stack of bills and coins on his desk. "That is the full amount owed, as agreed. My land is no longer in danger of foreclosure." William Chase's face went through a series of expressions, finally settling on barely concealed annoyance. He counted the money slowly, clearly hoping to find an error, but Rose had been meticulous. It was all there. "Very well," he finally said, pulling out a receipt book. "Your payment is received and your mortgage is current. Congratulations, Mrs. Zimmerman." There was no warmth in his voice, but Rose did not care. She took the receipt with shaking hands and walked out of the bank with Isaac at her side. Once they were outside, she stopped and looked at the receipt, at the proof that she had done it. She had saved her land. Then she burst into tears. Isaac pulled her into his arms, holding her while she cried tears of relief and joy and exhaustion. "You did it," he murmured into her hair. "You did it, Rose. I am so proud of you." "We did it," Rose corrected, looking up at him. "I could not have done this without you, Isaac. You saved me." "No," Isaac said firmly. "You saved yourself. I just helped a little." They stood there on the street, holding each other, oblivious to the curious stares of passers-by. Finally, Rose pulled back and wiped her eyes, laughing at herself. "I must look a mess." "You look beautiful," Isaac said. "And Rose, now that your land is secure, can we set a wedding date?" Rose felt happiness bloom in her chest, bright and warm. "Yes, yes, let us get married as soon as possible. I do not want to wait any more. How about 2 weeks? That gives us time to arrange everything, but not so much time that I go crazy with anticipation. 2 weeks is perfect." They went to see the minister that same day, arranging for a wedding ceremony on October 15th. It would be small, just them and a few friends, but Rose did not care about having a big wedding. She just wanted to be Isaac's wife, to start their life together officially. The next 2 weeks were a whirlwind of preparation. Rose packed up her small house, sorting through her things and deciding what to take to Isaac's ranch and what to leave. She kept very little of Thomas's belongings, just a few personal items that she stored carefully in a trunk. She would always honor his memory, but this was a new chapter of her life. Isaac finished the addition to his house, and Rose spent a happy afternoon arranging her things in her new space. It felt like coming home, she realized. More than her adobe house ever had, this place with Isaac felt like where she belonged. On the evening before the wedding, Rose stood in her old house for the last time. She walked through the rooms, remembering everything that had happened here. The grief and the loneliness and the fear, yes, but also the strength she had found in herself, the determination to survive. This house had been her crucible, the place where she had been tested and had emerged stronger. "Thank you," she whispered to the empty rooms. "Thank you for teaching me who I really am." Then she locked the door and walked away, ready for whatever came next. The morning of October 15th dawned clear and beautiful, with a hint of coolness in the air that promised fall was coming. Rose dressed in a new dress that she had splurged on with some of the leftover money from her harvest. It was a deep blue that matched her eyes, simple but elegant. She pinned up her hair and put on the small pearl earrings that had been her mother's. Isaac met her at the church, looking handsome in a new suit. When he saw her walking up the aisle toward him, his face lit up with such joy that Rose felt tears prick at her eyes. This was right, she knew. This was exactly where she was supposed to be. The ceremony was simple but meaningful. They exchanged vows in front of the minister and the small gathering of friends, promising to love and honor each other for the rest of their lives. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Isaac kissed her with a tenderness that made Rose's heart swell. They celebrated with a meal at the hotel, the whole town invited to share in their happiness. Even William Chase made an appearance, offering stiff congratulations that Rose accepted graciously. She refused to let anything dampen her joy on this day. As the sun set, Isaac drove them back to his ranch, to their ranch. Rose corrected herself. This was her home now. Isaac helped her down from the wagon, then surprised her by sweeping her up into his arms. "What are you doing?" Rose laughed. "Carrying you over the threshold," Isaac said. "It is tradition." He carried her into the house, into their bedroom, and set her down gently. For a moment they just looked at each other, the reality of their marriage settling over them. Then Isaac cupped her face in his hands. "I love you, Rose Edwards," he said softly. "I will spend every day of the rest of my life trying to make you happy." "You already make me happy," Rose whispered. "You gave me hope when I had none. You gave me a future when I thought I had lost everything. You gave me yourself. I love you, Isaac, so very much." They came together then, husband and wife, building the foundation of their new life together in the most intimate way possible. And later, wrapped in Isaac's arms, Rose felt a peace she had not known in years. She was home. She was loved. She was exactly where she belonged. The first year of their marriage was one of adjustment and joy. Rose sold her old property to a young couple just starting out, using the money to help Isaac expand his cattle operation. They worked side by side, building their ranch into something they could both be proud of. Rose kept a small garden, not for survival but for pleasure, growing vegetables and flowers that brightened their home. They faced challenges, of course. A drought in the spring threatened their water supply. Disease swept through part of the herd. But they faced these challenges together, and that made all the difference. When Rose felt discouraged, Isaac was there to lift her up. When Isaac was overwhelmed, Rose was his steady support. In the summer of their second year of marriage, Rose discovered she was pregnant. She told Isaac one evening over dinner, watching his face carefully for his reaction. For a moment, he just stared at her, processing the news. Then a smile spread across his face that rivaled the sun. "A baby," he breathed. "We are going to have a baby." "Yes," Rose said, laughing at his expression. "Sometime in late winter, the doctor thinks." Isaac leaped up from his chair and swept her into his arms, spinning her around until she shrieked with laughter. "We are going to have a baby, Rose. This is the best news, the very best." "I am glad you think so," Rose said when he set her down. "I was hoping you would be happy." "Happy? I am ecstatic. I am over the moon. I am the luckiest man alive." He kissed her then, deep and passionate, and Rose felt her heart overflow with love for this man who was her husband, her partner, her best friend. Their son was born on a cold day in February of 1886, red-faced and squalling and absolutely perfect. They named him Thomas, after Rose's first husband, because Isaac said it was right to honor the man who had brought Rose to Arizona and set in motion the chain of events that led to their meeting. Rose held baby Thomas in her arms and looked at Isaac, at the way he gazed at their son with such wonder and love, and she thought about the long journey that had brought her to this moment. She thought about the young woman who had knelt in the hard Arizona earth, crying and desperate and alone. She thought about the garden she had planted out of desperation and hope. She thought about Isaac helping her dig, helping her plant not just vegetables but a future. "What are you thinking about?" Isaac asked, reaching over to stroke their son's downy head. "I am thinking about how far we have come," Rose said softly. "How much has changed since that day you stopped to help me with my garden." Isaac smiled, that warm smile that still made her heart skip. "I am glad I stopped. Best decision I ever made." "I am glad you stopped too. You asked if you could help me plant a future together, and look at us now. We have a son, a ranch, a life. We planted that future and it has grown into something beautiful." "It has," Isaac agreed, "and we are just getting started. This is just the beginning, Rose. We have so many more years ahead of us, so many more things to build and plant and grow together." Rose looked down at their son, then up at her husband, and felt a contentment so profound it brought tears to her eyes. She had lost so much, had been broken and desperate and alone. But she had survived. More than survived, she had thrived. She had found love again, had built a life that was richer and fuller than anything she had dreamed possible during those dark days after Thomas's death. Her journey had not been easy. There had been moments when she wanted to give up, when the obstacles seemed too great and the goal too distant. But she had kept going, one day at a time, one task at a time. She had planted her garden in the hard Arizona earth, and from that garden had grown everything she now held dear. Over the next few years, their family continued to grow. A daughter followed Thomas, then another son. Rose and Isaac's ranch prospered, becoming one of the most successful operations in the territory. They built a larger house to accommodate their growing family, with a big kitchen where Rose could cook, and a wide porch where they all gathered in the evenings. Rose still kept her garden, though now it was more for pleasure than necessity. She grew vegetables and flowers, teaching her children how to coax life from the desert soil. Thomas, as the eldest, took particular interest, and Rose could see hints of the man he would become in the serious way he approached the task of caring for the plants. Isaac became a respected figure in San Pedro, known for his fair dealing and his willingness to help neighbors in need, just as others had once helped his mother. He never forgot those early days when he and Rose were building their life together, and he made sure to pay that kindness forward whenever he could. Rose sometimes thought about William Chase and wondered what had become of him. She heard eventually that he had moved on to a larger town, seeking bigger opportunities. She felt no animosity toward him. He had been a challenge she had overcome, nothing more. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Isaac took Rose back to the plateau where he had first told her he loved her. They left the children with Pete and his wife for the night and rode out just the two of them, retracing the path they had taken all those years ago. The view was just as breathtaking as Rose remembered. They spread out a blanket and watched the sunset, sitting close together as they had done so many times before. "You ever regret it?" Isaac asked. "Marrying me, I mean. Taking a chance on a future with someone new." Rose looked at him in surprise. "Never. Not for a single moment." "Why would you ask that?" Isaac shrugged, looking almost embarrassed. "I just want to make sure you are happy, that this life we built together is what you want." Rose took his hand and laced her fingers through his. "Isaac Edwards, you gave me everything. You gave me hope when I had none. You gave me love when I thought I would never feel it again. You gave me a family and a home and a life that is better than anything I could have imagined. I am happy, so incredibly happy, and I love you more today than I did the day we married." "I love you too," Isaac said, his voice rough with emotion. "More than I can possibly express. You are my partner in every sense of the word, Rose, my wife, my friend, my equal. Everything I have, everything I am, I share with you." They kissed as the sun set, painting the sky in brilliant colors. And Rose thought about that first garden, the one she had planted in desperation and determination. That garden had saved her land, yes, but more than that, it had saved her. It had given her purpose and hope when she had nothing else, and it had brought Isaac into her life. She had planted a garden and Isaac had helped her dig. Together they had planted a future, and that future had grown into a life more beautiful than any garden could ever be. A life filled with love and laughter and children. A life built on partnership and respect and deep, abiding affection. Years later, when Rose was an old woman with grandchildren climbing on her lap, she would tell them about that garden, about the hot Arizona sun and the hard desert earth, about the young widow who thought she had lost everything but found the strength to keep fighting, about the rancher who stopped to help and ended up changing her life. "Remember," she would tell them, her voice still strong despite her age, "when you plant something with hope and care, you never know what it might grow into." That garden saved my land, but more importantly, it brought me your grandfather. And from that meeting grew all of this. All of you." The grandchildren would listen, wide-eyed, to the story of the garden and the rancher and the future that grew from hard-packed Arizona soil. And Rose would look around at her family, at the life she and Isaac had built together over decades of partnership and love. And she would feel that same sense of wonder she had felt holding baby Thomas for the first time. They had planted a future together, she and Isaac. And oh, what a glorious harvest it had yielded. Isaac lived to be 83 years old, healthy and strong until the very end. When he passed peacefully in his sleep, Rose was beside him, holding his hand as she had held it so many times over their 50 years of marriage. She grieved him deeply, as she had once grieved Thomas, but this time the grief was different. This time she had a lifetime of memories to sustain her, a family that surrounded her with love, a legacy that would continue long after she was gone. Rose lived another 5 years after Isaac's death, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren. She spent her days in the garden she still kept, her gnarled hands coaxing life from the earth with the same skill and love she had shown as a young woman. And in the evenings, she would sit on the porch and look out at the land she and Isaac had built together, and she would feel his presence beside her. When Rose finally passed at the age of 87, it was with a smile on her face and Isaac's name on her lips. They buried her next to him on a small hill overlooking their ranch, under the wide Arizona sky they had both loved so much. And on her headstone, beneath her name and dates, her children had carved a simple epitaph that captured the essence of her life. She planted hope in barren ground, and from it grew love everlasting. The ranch continued for generations, passed down through Rose and Isaac's children and their children's children. And every generation kept a garden, remembering the story of the widow who refused to give up and the rancher who helped her dig, and the future they planted together in the hard Arizona earth. Because some gardens, Rose had learned, yield more than vegetables. Some gardens yield hope and love, and a future that stretches far beyond what you can see when you first push that seed into the ground. You just have to have the courage to plant it, the determination to tend it, and the wisdom to accept help when it is offered. Rose had planted her garden with tears and desperation, not knowing what would grow. But with Isaac's help, from that garden had grown everything that mattered. A partnership, a family, a life built on love and mutual respect, and the understanding that the best things in life are the things you build together. That garden in the Arizona desert, planted by a desperate widow and tended with the help of a kind rancher, had yielded the richest harvest of all. It had grown a future filled with love, and that love had endured beyond both their lifetimes, passed down through the generations like the most precious of seeds. And every spring, when the Edwards family planted their garden as they had done for over a century, they remembered Rose and Isaac, and the day when a simple act of kindness changed everything. They remembered that helping a neighbor, offering a hand to someone in need, was never a small thing. Because you never knew what might grow from that one act of generosity. Rose had needed help digging her garden, and Isaac had offered it freely. From that offer had grown a love story that became family legend, a reminder that even in the hardest times, even in the most barren places, beautiful things can grow if you have hope, determination, and someone willing to stand beside you and help you dig. The garden was where it all began. But the love that grew from it, that was the true harvest. And it was a harvest that continued to nourish the Edwards family for generations. A legacy of love planted in the Arizona desert by a widow and a rancher who dared to believe that even from hard, unyielding ground, something beautiful could grow. And they were right.